So this first session is focusing on our Fuel from the Field series. I touched on it yesterday a little bit. This is a project that's in our strategic growth pillar under our foundation. I didn't really talk about this yesterday, I kind of skipped over it, but throughout all of our projects runs the foundation of innovation, data, and analytics. So that means with every project that we do so with a lens towards innovation and data and analytics. So you'll see the presence of all of those throughout all of our projects. This one, innovation is just part of MDC's DNA. It's part of our strategic plan, which I'm happily responsible for. And we have an amazing partner in FutureThink. Our relationship with Lisa and her team goes back to 2018. We've done a variety of things with FutureThink, workshops. You saw Lisa's keynote yesterday. We've done remote learning. We've done deep dive sessions, so an extensive array of activities with FutureThink. So we have put together a plan for 2022, and Lisa, you want to maybe run through a little bit of what that looks like?
So I know when we talked yesterday about some of those cool skills that people in large organizations are starting to empower their people with, they're really called power skills. So those things like being simplified, unbossed, and curious are things that you and your teams are really going to want to learn. We teach that, and partnering with MDC, we've put together this curriculum that you see here that's basically on like a quarterly basis that does a couple things. First of all, it's going to teach and have access to you a few different skills that you're going to want to know. We're going to teach things on simplification, innovation, agility and resilience, curiosity and collaboration. And if you sign up using the QR code right here, as well as I think there's cards on your table, you can sign up to be a part of this series. And basically how it works is around each quarter, you'll be invited to participate in a 1-hour virtual workshop. And then it'll be followed by a 30-day challenge, which I'm going to talk about. So you don't just learn it, but you apply it every day at work. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about those challenges. So we're actually going to launch with a simplicity challenge for you all. These are 30-day challenges that show up in your inbox each day with a 10-minute tip that you can try and apply to work. So some of those things on the cards that you had yesterday, you're going to actually get a little bit more juice on it and be able to try it at work to start getting time back for work that matters. If you sign up here, and I don't know what the deadline is, Rach. When's the deadline? We have to by, I forget what day.
2/14, I think.
2/14 by Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And then the challenge will start coming into your inbox if you sign up at the end of the month. So we hope that you come, and we hope that you sign up. It'll come to your inbox, and you'll get some great data, not just for yourselves, but for the rest of the group in terms of what rules you like to kill, what meetings you kill, and the progress that you make.
And I think there's this huge prize that I forgot to check on before I came on stage. So, Rach, do you remember what like that grand prize is at the end? If people do all of these challenges, and okay, I swear it's like $1,500. If you do all of the challenges, you'll be entered into a drawing to win $1,500. Not like an Amazon gift card, but like dollars.
$1,500.
$1,500.
Hard cash in a box
hard,
delivered to your door.
Cash.
Okay, fantastic.
So I think that if that is not true, I will make it true. So please participate in this. I think it'll be really fun. This will carry us through 2022. The other thing we have going on is Fuel from the Field, which I touched on earlier. And Lisa and I were kicking around ideas a year ago, and we came across this idea of let's just do these short, quick little interview videos and just take people out of the credit union space, take you out of your normal day-to-day job, and just introduce you to some amazing innovators from different industries. And Lisa has some great contacts, if you didn't pick up on that in her keynote yesterday. Do you want to tell us a little bit about them?
So if you haven't seen these yet, these are great 10-minute videos from leaders in the field across all different types of disciplines that are just not just really great innovators, but just cool people with amazing backgrounds. So some of the ones that are already posted online from Fuel from the Field are things like, we had Tiffany Bova, who was the Chief Growth Evangelist from Salesforce. She's amazing. Simon Brown, the Chief Learning Officer from Novartis. Molly Bloom from Molly's Game. We had folks, Roger Firestein, Epstein, who is from the Creative Problem Solving Institute, which is a fantastic institute, as well as Kelly Leonard, the director from Second City, and more. Very cool people.
More. So our most popular one,
I'm going to introduce
believe
right
it or
now.
not.
So if we go to the next slide, I want to introduce to you now a little bit of building on the Fuel from the Field, and actually the most popular, most watched Fuel from the Field video. I'm going to introduce to you today our keynote speaker, Chris Barton, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Chris is an amazing guy, and he's going to talk to us today not just about disruptive ideas, but the persistence it takes to see them through. Now, Chris actually is the founder of Shazam. How many people here have used Shazam before? Everybody has used Shazam before. It's like it's our time. It's like our name that tune of our generation, right? Online. Chris came up with the idea for Shazam in 1999, believe it or not. And what was really interesting about it was it required AI algorithms that scientists at Stanford and MIT said were impossible. It will never happen. And so they joined his team and tried to make it happen, which was amazing. So what was amazing is today, Shazam has been downloaded by 1 billion people, 1 billion people, and it was acquired by Apple in September of 2018. It was their 5th largest acquisition in history. Chris has also done a lot of different things. He has been at Google. He was the head of Android business development and also a little known company called Dropbox, where he was the head of mobile operator partnerships. So let's give a big welcome to our keynote guest, Chris Barton. Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. After you.
Thanks.
I'll see you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. My son is going to be very excited because I actually keep a list. My son's 13, and as he's grew up over the last few years, I would keep a list of funny little things he's said, just good memories. And he's dyslexic, and I still remember when he was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, driving down the street, and he looked over and he said, "Daddy, what's a credit onion?" And so that's on my little short list. I was imagining what was in his mind, someone, can help see whether you're cooking at the last time when you're short on cash. So today, I thought I would tell you a little bit about this story of my experience creating Shazam. Because really, this was initially just an idea that I had while I was at business school. And I thought, oh yeah, this is going to be great. We're going to start a company around this. And oh my gosh, I didn't realize all the challenges that we'd face in actually creating this business from the ground up. So a little bit about Shazam, just some background, is that although I'm American, I have a British father, and I thought I'd start this company in London. So it's actually a company that was founded in London, along with 3 other co-founders. As Lisa mentioned, we had over 1 billion downloads. It's actually quite a lot larger than that now. That was announced years ago, but we can't disclose Apple confidential numbers. We raised $140 million in venture capital during the course of building Shazam, and it culminated in 2018, about 18 years after starting the company, with Apple acquiring it. But this quote you see here at the bottom of the slide is one of the motivators for me. It was when I was raising money and pitching to venture capitalists, and one of the venture capitalists that evaluated our small demo and our PowerPoint presentation of what we were going to build said, "I don't see why anyone would ever use this." So this is a picture of 2 of my co-founders and myself sitting at Hyde Park in London after one of our brainstorming sessions, where we were brainstorming different ideas. Because at this time, back in, this is 1999, we were just focused on starting a company, and we didn't know what that company would be. And we would meet for coffees in London and just throw out all kinds of crazy ideas and make lists of these ideas and then sort of analyze them and generally shoot them down, because some of them were pretty bad ideas. One thing that had been a personal focus in my life was this problem of what's that song? And I used to keep a list as I would go through daily life, and I heard a song that I liked. I'd ask around and try to find out what it was, and I'd add it to my little list. And then if anyone remembers before streaming music, there was something called, before CDs, there was miscellaneous tapes. Remember those things? So I built miscellaneous tapes that comprised of my favorite songs once I had built a sufficient list. So clearly that was a motivator for the concept of Shazam, which was, wouldn't it be great if you could just figure out that song right at the moment that you're hearing it, right from your phone? That would be like a magical experience if you could just hold your phone up and boom, it would tell you what the name of the song was. And so I thought, wow, we're going to call this thing Shazam. And Shazam actually means to conjure magic. So it's been used in comic series with Billy Batson, who conjures magic, and a lightning bolt comes down from the sky and turns him into a superhero. And it's been used in other contexts as well, this conjuring magic. And I really thought that if someone held their phone up, identified a song, it would feel like magic. But our idea to build this company was that that was a killer feature or app, but what could we do beyond that? And so we believed in this vision of a full end-to-end music experience from Shazam. We believed that when you experience this moment where you hear a song that you like, and that might take place in a bar, club, cafe, movie theater, retail store, could be anywhere, even a laundromat. And you hear that song and you're moved by it, we call that the music moment. And at a music moment, you would want to find out what that song was, but then you'd have an entree into everything related to that artist. So you could find out the discography of the artist, you could see the lyrics of the song, you could share the song with a friend, you could look at the album art, you could add it to a miscellaneous CD, many, many things, and we would be this entry point into the music experience related to your own personal tastes. That was the vision for Shazam. But little did we know how difficult it would be to do this. Because actually the innovation of Shazam was not, what's that song? In fact, there were about 7 companies, startup companies, and one large company called Sony, that were all building this what's that song. That was actually not a novel idea. The novel idea that none of those companies were doing, because these other 7 companies were doing the easy technical thing, which is to monitor thousands of radio stations and then provide a service where you can say, I'm listening to this radio station, what's the song playing on it? The novel idea of Shazam was, what if you could do that without monitoring radio stations? What if you could do it by just grabbing the music out of thin air right over the microphone of the phone? And that was the breakthrough idea. But when we took that concept, which is basically pattern recognition technology, and we presented it to the specialists in this area, who are all PhDs in audio signal processing, typically out of great places like Stanford or MIT Media Lab, we went to these people, we told them our idea, and they said there is no known technology that can do this, and they had no idea how to do it. So we went to a professor at Stanford. He was worldwide eminent in this very niche field of audio signal processing for music and acoustics. He was actually the head electrical engineering professor in a department at Stanford called the CCRMA, Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics. And he said, I have no idea how to do this technology, how to invent it, but I'd love to be your advisor. And the first assignment that I gave him was that I had researched all over Google and found all these PhDs from various programs that had published in this area of music technology. And I showed him this list of 30 names. He knew them all because it's a small world. And I said, please rank the 5 smartest because I need a co-founder. And so you can see the actual original notes from that if you're looking to hire any really good signal processing people. But we went to Avery Wang, the #1 choice on that list, who had 4 degrees from Stanford in mathematics and electrical engineering. And we met with him through this professor, and he became the 4th co-founder of Shazam. However, the next problem was that he also thought it was impossible. And he literally just tried to think of ideas for months as the co-founder of this company with no money and no ability to get money, given that we didn't have a technology either. And all the pressure was on him. I told him he needed to invent it within 2 months. And so he worked on it. But this gives you a sense for all the challenges that he was facing, because we were recording audio out of the air onto a phone, but the quality of that audio signal was very poor because of all the challenges you see. Noise, background people talking, voice compression, technologies on phones that were built to focus on sending over only human voice sounds and cutting off other ends of the spectrum. Noise cancellation, technologies built into mobile phones that focus on the human voice and de-emphasize all other sounds, including music. Speed variation, DJs changing the speed of their music as they're playing the music, again, creating new challenges for Shazam to identify that music. Pitch correction, when DJs have a digital solutions instead of vinyl solutions for music, where they can digitally adjust the pitch after they speed it up so it doesn't sound like the Chipmunks. Reverberation, such as what you get in a room like this. And then all the computational challenges of scaling across a large number of songs and still having robust, meaningful results. Working to find, we might record any part of a song, so you didn't know if it was the beginning, the middle, or the end, or some part in between, and just being able to identify the song based on those few seconds of music. So all these challenges. To give you a sense of how the challenges and what we're up against, I'm going to play for you a small sample of a song. Does anyone here identified the song? Okay, good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play for you what Shazam hears when you're recording on a phone in a pub-like environment where people are congregating. You can see why they all said it was impossible. So fortunately, I made the very smart decision as a CEO of going on vacation. And I went sailing in Croatia for a week, and somehow that solved the problem, because I checked my voicemail, which dates this experience, and dialed into it from Croatia, and there was a voicemail from Avery saying, "We did it. We figured it out. We cracked the code. We came up with a way to identify music in a noisy environment." And they had invented this concept of a search, much like Google, except this search was a three-dimensional plot, a three-dimensional search of spectral peaks, which are energy peaks in sound. And it was a search across time and energy plotted against time and frequency. So a three-dimensional graph of energy peaks of sound. Actually, it wasn't even music recognition that we had invented. It was recognition of recorded sound, highly robust for almost any recorded sound, including audio from commercials and so on. So we finally had a technology. But of course now we needed money. And this is right after the dot-com bubble popped in 2000. And so we went out to over 100 venture capital firms and were turned down by all of them until finally one stepped forward and gave us a term sheet to raise $7.5 million. So that was a big uphill battle to get some money to build Shazam. And we faced so many things that we had to overcome that we did not expect, because we were so far ahead of our time. I mean, imagine that when we were conceiving of this idea of Shazam, that the iTunes and the iPod had not been invented yet, had not been launched. So there wasn't even a world of digital music. There was no economy of downloading digital songs. And all those experiences that I mentioned of looking at album art and reading the lyrics of the artist and sharing it with friends, they really needed a graphical user interface, a GUI, as they say. And that was 7 years away, because the iPhone was not launched until 2007. And then a year after the iPhone launched, the App Store was launched, the means for getting distribution and users. That didn't exist. So this was the most popular phone when we were starting Shazam, the Nokia 3310, which is 84 by 48 pixels that are monochrome on a screen. There's no ability to do cover art or play videos or lyrics, share with friends, advertise. There's nothing you could do with this phone, really. In fact, at that time, really all people did with mobile phones is they made phone calls and they sent text messages to each other. The one innovative thing outside of that was that sometimes people would download a ringtone to their phone that was monophonic. And so here we were saying, now we're going to do this new thing. And the way Shazam launched, when we launched our service in 2002, is that you dialed a phone number on your phone. And for us, it was a 4-digit number, 2580, the only 4 digits on the phone in a straight line, straight down the middle. And you dialed that number, it initiated a voice phone call into an interactive voice response system. That IVR answered the phone, we recorded 15 seconds of sound, and then we terminated the phone call and sent a text message back to your phone with the name of the song. And that was Shazam when we launched. Very basic, but available to every mobile phone user in the market that we launched in first, which was the United Kingdom. To get to that service, however, again, such incredible challenges of what we had to overcome. There was no Amazon AWS at that time. And in fact, when we were starting Shazam in 2000, we were only 2 years behind Google, which had started in 1998. And we heard that Google built this search engine from scratch using racks of PCs, and it was called a Beowulf cluster, where they use all the PCs wired together to do parallel processing. And so we decided to do the same thing, and we built our own Beowulf cluster of PCs. And in the RAM of our Beowulf cluster resided all the fingerprints of all the music, so that people could identify any song. And each call that came in, we'd run through a search across all the RAM, all the fingerprints of all that music in tiny fractions of a second to produce a result for the end user. So we had to build this, architect this hardware and all the software that ran it, the search engine, all from scratch, small startup. And then, of course, the other component to providing a search engine for music is to actually have the music so that people can find it. And there was no digital database of music that was available to us at that time. So we had to start from CDs, from scratch. And so we had to build software from scratch that would basically sort of rip fingerprints from CDs. Fingerprints are mathematical descriptions of the music sound. And then we hired about 20 or 30 18-year-olds to work in 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, taking CDs, putting them into computers, and then typing the name of every song, every artist, every album name from scratch, so that we could build this vast database of music so that we could launch a search engine for Shazam. It gives you a context for how hard things were for a startup like us back then. And so finally, we launched. Here are 2 of my co-founders, Philippe and Dheeraj, and celebrating at our launch party. And it was so exciting to launch to the world. and know that we were going to become this huge, successful company that would just be used by all mobile phone users. But the reality is that it was incredibly challenging to get users because, again, we did not have a graphical user interface. There was no app store for distribution. And people just didn't know about using phones for a service like this. So the cost of educating people and getting the message out to tell them that you can now do this new thing with your phone was far more than the actual revenues that we'd get back from the users. So we really, really struggled. And for years, we had very small numbers of users, tens of thousands, using Shazam. And we were burning through our finances, running out of money. We had 2 rounds of layoffs. We nearly closed our doors because when we launched in 2002, we are 6 years away from when the real launch of smartphones would occur with the App Store in 2008. And we had to survive all 6 of those years, just barely surviving, finding ways to make ends meet and stay alive as a company. But then finally, the App Store launched in 2008, and we were an instant success. And we were immediately one of the top most downloaded apps, and we remained in those top downloaded apps category. Apple produced and announced who are the top apps of downloads around the world, and there we were up with companies like Google, Facebook, as among the most popular apps. And I have to admit, I did reach back out to that venture capitalist. And the one who said I would never use this service, who would? And I said, it turns out people will use this. In fact, millions. Shazam gets 8 million new users downloading the service every month. So it was incredibly exciting. Some of the learnings from creating Shazam that I had, one being simplicity and how to achieve it. And I think that from my experience working at Google as well and Dropbox, looking out, often people say, yes, simplicity is really important. Many companies say we're going to create simple experiences. But often it's at the surface level and they're focused on simple UIs, simple graphics, simple messages. But what I find really exciting is when you create simplicity by solving something very complex. And that's what we did with Shazam. For the user, you just push a button and you get a song, but behind the scenes is an incredibly complex set of algorithms so that you can just have this magical, immediate experience. And similarly, Dropbox and Google focused on simplicity that came from very complex problems. So Dropbox was actually one of the last companies to try cloud storage. But all the earlier companies that had launched cloud storage had a lot of trouble getting users to use their services because you had to go and click upload each time. And then when you wanted the file back, you had to click download. Whereas Dropbox, as you know, solved synchronization so that the files were just in a folder and they were being uploaded and downloaded without you doing anything. And as one Dropbox early employee said to me, the competitors had 1 step and we have 0, and the difference between 1 and 0 is infinite. And that's why Dropbox succeeded. So I really believe that when you can do something that's very, very complicated or complex in the interest of creating this simple experience for the end user, that's when you've really created simplicity of tremendous value. We learned about how revenue is like oxygen for a startup, and you really need to find it as early as possible to survive. And in fact, while we struggled in those 6 years trying to make it to when the App Store came out, we built a side business where we monitored thousands of radio stations and sold that information to businesses that needed to distribute royalties to artists. And that became funding in a form of revenue for the company to help us stay alive during those years. Similarly, Google in its early days, many people don't know, but the early revenues from Google came as a check from Yahoo, because Yahoo hired Google to run its search engine. And that's what paid the bills for multiple years while Google built a consumer-facing business. And we learned about what I call creative persistence. And really what that means is that it's not just one innovation. So it wasn't just, let's identify songs and build an incredible pattern recognition technology so that we can have this amazing innovation and become this amazingly successful company. But what really creates a successful outcome like Shazam or Dropbox or Google is many, many, many incremental innovations. Many small problems being solved, but not just simply solved by working harder, trying harder, and being persistent, but also by being creative in that persistence and coming up with little mini innovations, little mini solutions that are nonconformist, that are thinking outside the box in order to solve a problem. I saw this go on at Google and at Dropbox, and it's what ultimately leads to the successful outcome that you see with huge consumer usage and adoption. So one example that I like to talk about at Shazam is this motorcycle that you see here. So one of the problems we faced as an early startup is that there's two sets of music, really. There's all the music in history, sort of the archive, back catalog archives, but there's also brand new music releases. And brand new music releases might only be a handful of songs, but you have to have them because they get played on the radio and people want to identify them. But what we learned is that the actual life cycle of music at that time was that a new song would be created by a record label or a band and released by a record label. And it would initially, only a handful of CDs would be sent to the DJs exclusively of the radio stations. And no consumer could get a hold of these CDs. You couldn't buy a CD. They were pre-release music played on the radio. And we knew at Shazam that we needed that music because people were going to start identifying it. But we were just a little startup, and record companies were not going to send us this very exclusive pre-release music. So we cut a very creative deal with an employee of a local radio station in London, Greater London, where our office was. And for cash, we would send a motorcycle over to him once a week, pick up a few CDs, the new releases, motorcycle them over to our offices, hand over a few $20 bills, ingest the music into our database, put the CDs back on the motorcycle, send it back so we can play it on the radio. And that's how we got pre-release music in the early days of Shazam. And it gives you such an example of the creative thinking that you have to do in order to solve these problems and end with a great user experience. And so it's not just that creative thinking, but it's all that effort that you're putting in. And I love this mathematical truth, because we were really putting this extra effort into Shazam and trying to survive and trying to innovate and trying to get over these hurdles for so long, for the 6 years from launch until the App Store. And this shows you what putting in that 1% more effort, how it compounds in a 365-day year compared to putting in just 99% effort. Incredible compounding effects. And I really believe it's this persistence from the whole team that built Shazam that ultimately led to its success rather than demise. And I love this quote as an entrepreneur, how the greatest pleasure in life is doing what people say you cannot do. And that was incredibly pleasurable for me and my co-founders as we overcame all these challenges that so many venture capitalists thought we would not succeed in, so many partners did not believe we would succeed in, and finally we did. And so I always like to finish off by showing this one old Apple commercial. Does anyone recognize this just from this image? A really old Apple commercial. You'll hear the voice of Steve Jobs, and it's really showing how innovators, entrepreneurs, inventors, creators, how often they're perceived as almost crazy as they're doing these things, and yet they keep on pursuing this innovation and doing what they believe in. So I'll just play that.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Thank you very much.
That was amazing. Let's pull our stuff out.
Yeah.
We're going to do a quick Q&A and have a little fireside chat here with Chris. We've got an amazing, some backstories that we think will be pretty interesting for you to hear. Let me just pull up my chair too. So I've got my first question that I want to ask you in the time that we have. What's your favorite song and what's your favorite band?
So the embarrassing thing is that I wouldn't even know what the name of the song is. I could just know what it is.
I know how you can find it.
But it's a song, my favorite band, it's by my favorite band, which is this band called Elbow.
No idea.
Not that famous of a band, but I love them. They're kind of like Radiohead.
Okay.
And actually the way I found them is in the early days of Shazam, we had a music expert consultant that would go and hunt and make sure that we have all the latest music. And I said to him, I really love Radiohead, but I want to find other bands. And he was like my personal recommendation service, because he's like, oh, you should check out this band Elbow. And so I did, and I love them.
So do you like music or do you like ideas? Like, was this, I'm a total music head and I just want to be able to have a way to find it, or no?
Yeah, so I would definitely, I'm not a music head, and I actually, like, I've probably been to far less concerts than most people, and I definitely wouldn't be able to name bands, as many bands as most people could, and I wouldn't be able to say, this is what's playing on the radio. So yeah, I'm actually not a big music-y person, but of course, I like music. And so that's actually why I needed Shazam, is that I would hear music, but I would never know what it was. And I did want to build my own little lists.
So, all right, I have to ask you too some crazy stories, because I was telling people that I was going to be interviewing you and they're like, oh my God, I just love Shazam. So do people come up to you all the time and are like, oh my God, I love your app? Or what are some crazy stories of people using Shazam?
Yeah, people don't come up to me because I'm not a recognized person. I do try to wear my Shazam socks, to see if it will inspire people to come up. But I remember I definitely see sort of out in the wild sometimes people using the product, and it is such a satisfying experience. I had one experience in particular where I was just down at my little tiny grocery store down the street from where I lived, and just as I was in line to pay at the counter for some fresh, yummy fruits, a conversation started where the customer said, oh, what's that song? And it was coming out from the speaker, and then the person behind the register is like, oh yeah, let's Shazam it. And there was a whole little kind of interaction where several people were Shazamming the song and talking about, what is it, and all in front of me. And it's just so exciting to watch that happen right in front of your eyes. And of course, I didn't say anything. I'm just thinking, that's my product.
You didn't explain to them how it works exactly, no. So yeah, I like that you're talking about creative persistence, but I think everyone here that knows when we try and innovate, there's mistakes along the way. So was there anything that you look back on and you're like, oh, that was a big mistake when we were building Shazam?
Oh gosh, so many mistakes. Actually, what's interesting is that a lot of the mistakes were really once we had become a success. So once we had a lot of users after the iPhone, for example, launched, and then now we were the stars. We had $140 million of venture capital money, and now what are we gonna do to build this amazing business? And then you can lose sight sometimes of the real magic that's focused on the end user.
We've got risks now, right?
Yes. And then you're kind of telling these stories of this is what we're gonna do, how we're gonna make all our money, and so on. And you start to really focus on things other than the end customers sometimes. And it's more like, oh, what do the advertisers want, or what's Facebook or Twitter doing? And you start to kind of think, oh, can we do something like that, rather than starting from the end user. That real focus of like, well, what does the end user really want? It was much more, what are these other parties thinking that we could build?
So, it's interesting too, because we were talking the other day about your other experiences. You have Shazam, but then you have those other little companies, Google, right, and Dropbox. So clearly you've got all this great technical background. But you go from Shazam, like a startup, right, and then all of a sudden you're at Google, and you were there, well, you were pre-IPO. How many people were there?
There's 2,000 people.
Just same as today, right? 2,000 people. So you're there in these pre-IPO days. Talk a little bit about the culture at Google like that, right, in 2000 versus what you think it's like now.
Gosh, that's a good, I mean, I think they still do invest very heavily in keeping the innovation going.
Yeah.
Despite, and that was part of the kind of DNA from their very early days, is they recognize innovation can come from anywhere. It can come from all the employees, and we really want to optimize how we can capture this innovation on an ongoing basis. And in fact, as being a big company starts to threaten that over time. So they built in so many things. They built in sort of this concept of 20% time, which many people have heard about, where engineers could spend some time on a side project.
And is it real? Do they really let people take 20%?
They really let people have side projects if you approve, but it's not just every employee, and you have to kind of take it to the manager and of course assess the opportunity. But they're pretty open-minded, and some of their products like Gmail, came from that kind of, started off as like an engineer
like a side
project.
gig. Yeah.
They also have an Ideas at Google email address. Everyone can email just Ideas at Google, and you just email in an idea, and then it just gets posted into this list of ideas, and then everyone kind of ranks it and rates it, and it's tracked over time, so that they're always trying to capture ideas that way. They have these sort of days where everyone will take the day off from their job, and they'll just focus on conquering some problem. And then the whole company will do this. And then they'll actually assign teams to actually go out and solve some of the biggest problems that are identified.
Like, what were some of the problems that came up? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember.
Besides meetings, like we talked about.
It'd be so many things. I mean, they would innovate on so many things. In fact, I remember, here's an example, again, you have to keep in mind this would be around when I was at Google, so 2004 or 5, right? I would get an email automatically from within Google, and it would just say, "You worked at Microsoft in 1999. We're about to give an offer to this candidate who also worked at Microsoft in 1999. Do you know them?" And it was their way of automating back channeling on people and looking into the backgrounds of people and trying to find out what we know about them.
Oh, that's so
people
interesting.
that were hiring, but all automated because they basically had scanned in everyone's resumes and identified when people had worked at which companies, and then leveraging that information.
Wow. Okay, that's cool and a little creepy.
And a little creepy, yes.
It's a little creepy. So just for some recommendations for everybody here, right? We're talking to financial services, credit unions, people that are really into the customer, right? They have their eye on the customer. So what recommendations can you give to them to have more creative persistence? Because it's hard right now. People are burned out. There's this thing called COVID that's happening, but they still got to make money. What do they do?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it really is, I think when you're embarking on the idea of creating something new or coming up with some idea, I do think it's really important to kind of start with that sort of, as Elon Musk has really talked about, these first principles approach. So you're really starting at the end and really focused on the end customer, and then kind of stepping backward and saying what would be absolutely ideal from them. Not what can we change, what can we improve on the path to the customer, but what would be absolutely ideal for them to experience.
And backcast from there.
Coming back, and sometimes when you come back from that, you realize there's all these incredible challenges, but instead of just realizing them and so, let's try something different, you start to just focus on how do we overcome these challenges.
Interesting. I don't think enough people do that backcasting like that. So, all right, so besides all the incredible things at Shazam, and now you're done with Google, you're on your own, done with Dropbox, what are you doing now? What's the next big project?
Yeah, so I have a new startup. It's very much kind of in the incubation stage, so it's really...
Can you talk about it?
Yes, I can talk about it, yeah. It's very early stage, and it's going to be a long road to get to it. Similar to Shazam, it involves quite significant technical kind of breakthroughs. This one's really focused on being more impact driven. So the goal is not to become a $1 billion company or be one of the biggest companies acquired by Apple, but simply just to solve a problem that I think is meaningful. So I don't think it will be very lucrative necessarily, but the company's called Guard, and what we're trying to build is a device that you can put into swimming pools, much like a smoke alarm, except it uses computer vision and it identifies drowning. So it's basically, it's always watching swimmers, but using technology, and then looking for patterns that look like drowning. Not just simply someone falling in a pool, but someone that's already swimming. And so it would be always on, and it's using artificial intelligence.
Oh my gosh. And what stage are you? Is this just at the right beginning, or you're starting to build already?
No, it's very, very early. We're still in sort of, because you're actually solving multiple problems. Again, so you're not just solving a problem of computer vision and artificial intelligence, which was definitely one big part of it, but you're also solving problems around the hardware. How would the hardware be designed so that you can put it into a pool? How will it have power? How can you make it so that it can be easily installed when pools have concrete all around them without having to jackhammer the concrete, which would cost thousands of dollars. In this particular case, I'm focused on something that would be somewhat affordable for residential pools, so maybe $2,000 or $3,000 compared to a build cost of $50,000, but something that could be introduced to the existing installed base of pools. So there are competitors that have been working on things like this, but they're really focused on commercial pools.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it.
$100,000 plus to install these things, and obviously that's not going to work for residential pools. So.
Wow, that's incredible. So you're doing social good. Amazing. Guys, we are out of time. Let's give a big round of applause to Chris and his incredible ideas. It's such a pleasure having you here. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.